Welcome into the Take the North podcast. I am Dan Wiederer, pleased to be joined today by WGN sports anchor Kaitlin Sharkey, friend of the podcast, Bears beat reporter as well, and my former partner on the now defunct Chicago Football Weekly on WGN. Kaitlin, how you doing?
Good to see you, Dan, and good to talk to you. I know I miss our weekly sessions, but now we'll just have to move it to Take the North.
Yeah, we're going to move our conversations around strategically as best we can. First appearance on Take the North. Thanks for joining us. I looked down at my calendar today and it said week 1, and I almost couldn't believe it because it feels like we've been waiting forever to get to this.
Yeah, I think this has been, training camp's always long, and obviously it's a lot longer for the players than it is for us, especially on the physical front. But this camp felt so long, and I just think this offseason felt long for the right reasons, right? There was a lot of excitement surrounding the draft, and then obviously every mini camp at OTA, but this was a long one. So I'm excited to no longer speculate about a team and players' individual performances, but actually talk about a result come Sunday.
There's a game Sunday at Soldier Field against the Tennessee Titans, and it doesn't feel real because of the build-up here. I was actually afraid in early August that we were going to lose you to the Canton, Ohio Tourism Bureau. You seemed like you're having such a good time with our extended stay.
Yes.
At the Hall of Fame.
That was way too long of a stay in Canton. That's all I'm going to say.
It also feels like that was about 1,000 years ago now that we're at this stage. And I guess as we get started, we always have to get started with Caleb Williams, right? Like this is the talk of Chicago right now. It's the talk of the NFL in a lot of ways. And our first experience collectively with him was down in Detroit at that Play 60 event the day before the draft. It's kind of the first time we, outside of the combine, had a chance to talk with him in a setting where we could learn a little bit more about him. The next night he gets drafted. He does a bunch of one-on-ones with you included, me included, Chicago media. And you started to get a glimpse into who Caleb was and what makes him tick. And I'm curious from your perspective, going all the way back to April and those first encounters, what's left the biggest impression on you about Caleb?
I think that Caleb Williams is very comfortable in how he operates being a star already. And I think that a lot of it, we hear how comfortable he is in his own skin. Well, you can actually see that play out. And I think to that rainy, cold Play 60 event where he came out and, wasn't even wearing the same matching outfit as the rest of the draft class because he said it didn't fit him well. And, but he walked out there with such confidence already before he was even the number 1 overall pick. And we bombarded him in a media scrum, and he just handled and weaved his way through conversations. And I think about that moment. I think about that entire weekend. And then now I think about him preparing for this, his first week 1 of the regular season. And it's the same Caleb Williams. And I applaud him for that because nothing has changed. He walks into that press conference room with the same comfortability, confidence, and yet doesn't feel like it's an annoyance. And I know it's his rookie season.
Right.
It could be week 10 and he could be like, all right, now I am annoyed with the Bears beat and these ridiculous questions. But at this point, he just knows this is part of the gig. This is what I signed up for. I'm okay with it. I'm good at it. And I think it speaks volumes too, because that's what his teammates say about him. And the fact that he's a team captain as a rookie says a lot as well.
There's an understanding, I think, in his world of what he's trying to accomplish and what is required, the responsibility of trying to accomplish those things. And I guess I would describe it as almost graceful, the way he has handled himself both inside the building and then with the media and within the locker room. There's just a grace about it, I think, that really makes people feel comfortable.
Yeah. And to do it at such a young age. And I think it's just also an indication of how these collegiate athletes now come into a professional workforce with their NIL deals, and they're already brands where a generation ago, that wasn't even a thing. So now it's like they're much more comfortable in marketing settings. They understand the public platform that they do have and how important it is to go to a podium during a press conference, even though sometimes fans think that's not part of the job. It doesn't matter. They don't have to win press conferences. No, they don't have to win press conferences, but they also are their own brand as much as they are representing a team. So I think this rookie draft class and even the one before, they know what it's all about. And Caleb kind of personifies what he needs to do.
And you're a voice, right? Like, and you have to stand up there and project confidence. You have to project optimism. You have to project leadership. I think it's interesting to contrast Caleb's sort of instant comfort in that role with Matt Eberflus, who came in his first 2 years wasn't as comfortable and was a little awkward, was a little clumsy in press conference, didn't seem to have that forward facing charisma that people were looking for. That's changed a little bit in 2024. I think we've all been closely monitoring Flus 3.0, right? The new look, the new hairdo, the new beard, the new demeanor with the media. But he goes into this season with a lot to prove as a head football coach, right? And I'm curious from your perspective, having been along for the ride for the last 2+ years, what you are looking for from Matt Eberflus now that we start to play football games.
I think it's impressive that he has taken note of, again, how important representing your team and organization is, even as a head coach. Because yes, it's one thing to have a good hairstyle and suit and look a certain part, but it's much more important how you handle a podium and handle tough questions. And obviously he went through it the last couple seasons. I'm curious to see how he handles, there were a couple times in the last season where he was, we were trying to get injury clarifications and game status clarifications. And we're all like, he'd walk away and we'd be like, I'm more confused than we were when he was in here. I think I'm anxious to see how he does in those moments again. And if there are some bumps in the road, which there always are in an NFL season, no matter how high expectations are, he's going to be much more prepared to handle those, I think, this time around. And he's learned that sometimes strategy is one thing when you're talking to the media, but preparedness is a whole other thing. And Chicago, we leave little room for error when we expect a lot from the players and coaches that we speak to. And I think Flus is now prepared for that. Good hair and all.
No question. And we're going to, the glow up only goes so far as the win-loss record takes you in the first couple months of the season, because that glow can quickly dissipate if you get off to a 2-4 start and you hit the bye week and people are going, well, wait a second, like we were promised something other than that. To that end, you're one of the people that's around just about every day out at Haugh. You've been through all the training camp, the preseason. There's a vibe, right? And I think all of us that are there feel the energy, the optimism, the confidence. How do you describe it to people when you're trying to explain why that energy has mushroomed the way it has inside that building?
I think I'm going to reference something that assistant general manager Ian Cunningham told me, because I asked him a similar thing, because we do feel it, right? You feel this energy, you feel like it is different. And he said he credits it to joy. And I think that is, some people, the football hardos would be like, who cares about joy when we're talking about football, we're talking about a sport. But it's so important when this organization, the last couple of seasons, Dan, we know hasn't been very joyful. Hasn't been a lot of positive vibes inside of a building. And I think this time, yes, there are heightened expectations. It's easy to find joy when you have these shiny new rookies that are going to lead you hopefully to the promised land in this playoff run and all of those things. But I think it's the way they've put the right people in spots and the leaders that they have on this team, and especially from the top down. So I think it's understanding, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Caleb Williams, those guys, they're going to show up and do their job every single day. And I don't think that was always the case in previous rosters. You're like, well, what version of this supposed star are we going to get today? I don't think you have those questions right now with this team. And will they win every single game? Doubtful. I don't think they're going to have this incredible, crazy season, but it's going to be a much better season. And it starts with having the right people and the right mentality inside of Haugh.
To that end, I wrote a piece on Cole Kmet today at chicagotribune.com, and he described some of what you're talking about, which is he described it as a locker room full of guys that are Super Bowl driven, right? And they're about one thing, and there seems to be collective purpose on unlocking this land that Chicago hasn't experienced in generations, really, of having sustained success and being collectively motivated to do that. And I think that creates some of that joy, because guys do want to be in the building every day because they know the guy next to him wants the same things. And so then that just sort of snowballs. And I think we felt that through training camp. Now, again, we've both done this long enough to know that the joy of August can quickly turn into September misery if you're not careful. And so you have to figure out a way to sustain it. But there is certainly a sense of team unity that isn't just fluff.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't want to like lean into how a team can handle adversity, but the players in that locker room, especially the Cole Kmets, have been battle tested in their short NFL careers. But and I think it speaks also volumes to even a player like Mercedes Lewis, right? Like year 19. He could probably go. He has his options of where he wants to play in the NFL. I'm not saying they're abundant at this point in his career, but he has options. And the fact that he's like, yes, I want to sign up for another season and I want to do it in Chicago. I think that also speaks to what type of organization, because if you're Mercedes, you're like, I don't really need to be here necessarily, but I want to be here. And again, I have that goal in mind, and that is obviously a Super Bowl.
I was going to say, one of Mercedes' options is to go sit on a beach chair.
Yes.
And say, peace out. I gave you 18 years of my life. I'm going to go chill.
A very relaxing life, and not as I saw him like out there those last couple practices before they, were breaking before Labor Day. I kept watching him like, he doesn't have to be here, but he wants to be here. And I think that's, again, those type of caliber, high character players, that says a lot about your team.
Mercedes Lewis, 40 years old, so he's in the same decade as I am now, and so that's great to have somebody in the locker room that I can relate to on the older side. The other part of this, I think, is trying to get a feel for how they get off the ground right away. And we've got a home opener against a beatable opponent that's undergone a regime change, and it feels like this couldn't be a more friendly matchup to start the year for the expectations that have built. It's sort of like a lob toward the rim. Now go dunk it, and we're going to see if the Bears can do that. But I'm curious what you make of that, of just this sort of starting game, which is then, of course, followed by 2 more AFC South games, and you don't get a division game until deep into November. And so it's a pretty interesting start for the Bears.
Yeah, I don't know if they're happy or kind of, wishful that maybe they opened the season with the Packers, but I just have
We've tried that a couple times.
Yeah, and I think they're probably very pleased that like we don't even have to speak of that team until well after the bye week. And I've looked at the schedule a million times, and as I was writing it down just before again, and I'm like, this is a very winnable start to a season. So like if you're Caleb Williams, you're coming in and you're like, okay, if we're doing everything that we are expected to do, if everyone is playing up to the expectation that they're supposed to be, this is a very winnable chunk of games. I mean, the division is probably that second half when you're going Packers, Vikings, Lions, Niners, and then you're re-racking it with Vikings, Lions, Seahawks, Packers. That's where things are definitely be interesting at that point in the season. But to start, I mean, outside of the Texans and who knows, maybe Commanders, like those, I mean, Panthers, Colts, I mean, these to me are like on paper, you're like, this team is loaded compared to this team.
You feel like at a minimum you get to that bye week, come back from London at 3-3 at the bare minimum, and at least at that point you feel relevant. Last year it was 0-4 and the world was falling apart. Literally, not literally, but that you talk about joy. There was no joy in Hallis Hall on the Wednesday of Chiefs week when Justin Fields was criticizing coaching and Alan Williams was suddenly absent from the building and we couldn't figure out why. And Braxton Jones had a neck injury. There was no joy in those first 4 games of the season, and so the Bears, I think, do have to seize this opportunity early to create some of that positive momentum that keeps the vibes that are here right now rolling.
Yeah, and I think there's also, I feel like there needs to be a sense of, and I don't want to tell fans to be like cautiously optimistic, because I know that is annoying, especially for a fan base that has been waiting decades for a really solid, good and quarterback, especially. But, there has to be this sense of like, let's all float back down to earth and realize we have a rookie quarterback here that is going to go through all of this for the first time, and a new offensive coordinator. And yes, these talented players around him, but again, all playing for the first time together. And I know Caleb showed great flashes in the preseason, and I have no worries about this defense. I think this defense is just going to take off immediately from the jump. But yeah, I just don't, you don't want everyone to be like, oh my God, the first 3 and out of the season, everyone's having a meltdown Sunday.
And it's possible. I mean, that could occur, but obviously I think Caleb's going to show you a few flashes. And then to your point, you just lean on that defense for as long as you need to lean on them, because it is built to win you football games right now. And so until you feel like your quarterback can be the engine of everything, you just say, hey guys, follow them, And I did like Jalen Johnson on Monday, in the press conference, talking about how I'm done with the hype. I've been here It's my 5th season now. I've heard all this energy build up through previous preseasons, and then it all falls apart really quickly when we start losing. And so it's now not about talking about how good we're going to be. It's about every single game day being sharp enough to beat the team that's across from you, and then feeling that progress. And I think when you've got a guy like that, now a team captain who's grown into a leadership role, setting that kind of tone, and it's echoed by all the guys around you, you got that edge that I think you need, where, previously Ryan Poles has talked about a team walking into the building, believing it's going to win versus hoping it can win. And I think this team is crossing that bridge and maybe across it at this point.
Yeah. And a leader who just got paid, who doesn't have to be, he could be like, I don't care what the expectations are. I can go out there and ball and be Jalen Johnson. But that's just not who he is. And there's a reason he's a team captain. And I think that understanding of I think with this defense, we all know they're supposed to be good, but they can't go out there and not be now, because even last year when we were talking about, this team should be better, it was still missing things. It was still lacking things. And I think there's just not that level of patience with this defense, because they have no excuse really at this point.
Were you covering the Packers in 2019 when they opened the season here?
Yes, I was.
That Thursday night. So I'm curious, being on the other side of it then, because that's the last time that I walked into a season with this level of anticipation for what the opener was going to be like. And obviously the Bears laid a turd that night at Soldier Field and lost, and Mitch threw a late interception. And I think, I don't even know if they scored. It was a 10-3. It was a very low scoring game. And all of a sudden the air was out of the balloon in Chicago after months of buildup. I'm just curious what that felt like, if you recall, from the Packers end of things, because it was coming off a year where the Bears had won the division and looked like a Super Bowl hopeful. And then Aaron came to town and, did what Aaron did here. And it was like, oh God, we're still not over that hump.
I think it was that feeling of same old Bears. Doesn't matter how good, that year was or how special in their minds 2018 was from a Packers standpoint. It was like, they're still the Bears. And I think that's where the narrative, when players talk about, we got to, when Bears are like, we got to beat the Packers. And I think that's where it comes. It's not even, yes, you want to win the games, you wanted to win the division matchups, but I think it's more of the Bears proving they're not the same old Bears, because to Green Bay, to that fan base, to that organization, it's like, all right, cool. You got the number 1 overall draft pick, but if you can't beat us, you're still the same old Bears. And that's what that 2019 game reminded me of. Like, we don't care how special your 2018 was. Here they are again.
I mean, I have literally walked out of Lambeau Field a half dozen times, or down to the locker room post game with the chant of "Bears still suck" echoing through those corridors at Lambeau Field, right? And it was happening again last year when the Packers ended the season with a win that got them into the playoffs and sent the Bears home in last place with 10 more losses. And you're like, okay, well, 2023 was just bookended by this horribly disappointing season opening loss where it was like, Aaron Rodgers is gone now. It's our time to kill this demon. And Jordan Love beats them. And then the season ends. You don't score a touchdown. You lose 17-9, and the Packers are in the playoffs. And you're like, oh my God. And so like this sort of sentiment of same old Bears is something that these new Bears need to try to get rid of really quickly.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's also the Packers, just like you said, cruising to like their playoff run. And it was just like this seamless transition despite the little bump to the start of the season. And I think that's just as like, that's like the, salt in the wound. Like, and here they were just running off into this playoff run. And the Bears are like, wait, this wasn't supposed to happen.
Right. And Jordan Love is suddenly hitting this like springboard that everyone was anticipating for Justin Fields in 2023. And you're like, oh my God, like the torture of that for Chicago it's deep. You mentioned a couple minutes ago, your sit down with Ian Cunningham from August. And I'm curious what some of your more significant takeaways from that conversation were, just knowing how valuable he is to Ryan Poles in the front office, and 2, how he's part of the direction setting group there at Haugh that seems to have put the team on a good path.
Yeah, I think, Ian, also, we talk about like players becoming more comfortable in year 1, year 2, year 3, Matt Eberflus being more comfortable as a head coach. Ian Cunningham has become so much more comfortable in his role as an assistant GM. And I think, obviously he's on the cusp of being some other team's future general manager, whenever he wants to be, truly. But him being comfortable here in his role and how he collaborates with Ryan Poles. And I think it's a testament to what they've done, because it seems so far ago how disastrous things were in Chicago. And for the fact that it's not that long ago, I think speaks to the work that they've done. And, Ian talks about how hard the roster cuts were this season. And I know, GMs love to tell us that, like, every year it's hard. And no, but truly, I think they sat down and they were like, this is going to be a much tougher decision to build this 53 than it has in years past. And that's because they've done a great job of overhauling the roster. And I think, Ian speaks about the joy and the culture and all of those things. And I think also too, we think that's a little, sometimes like, is that cliche? Is like there's substance there, but no, there truly is. And I think he has done a good job of like letting Poles do his thing and make his decisions. And, I joked with him at the end of the interview. I said, Ryan Poles says you're not a yes man, and that's a good thing. And he's like, well, you're going to have to ask him about why he says that. But I think that dynamic, that relationship is super important, because I think if Ian in that role was like, sure, Ryan, like, right, it's your team, your roster, like whatever you think is best, I'm here to help do all the other things. And yeah, everything looks good. I mean, that's not going to lead. These two knew they needed to make major changes. So if you have someone that comes in and is like, we need to make some changes, and you don't have the other assistant pushing them to actually make the changes, I don't think this quick transition would have helped.
Well, and a good example of what you're referencing there is Ryan Poles' admitted antsiness on draft night, where he wants Rome Odunze so badly that he just wants to climb and make a trade. And Ian's telling him, just stay patient. We've run simulations. We know what these other teams want, and it's going to be better for us to keep our draft capital for the future and just stay put and sit tight at number 9. And lo and behold, they end up getting Rome Odunze at 9 after all. And it's one of those instances where you say, okay, that was a little tug of war, a little push and pull, but the trust that's been built up allowed Ryan to take that breath, as uncomfortable as it probably was for those 40 minutes or whatever it was. He ended up making a decision that was beneficial for the Bears in multiple ways. And I think that's one small snapshot of what Ian can do for his boss.
Yeah. And I think now that they can kind of turn the page, and I think speaking to Ian a couple of weeks ago, he was like, I'm ready to turn the page to the regular season and see the work that we've actually put in. And because you have this vision, when you come into an organization, you're like, well, we want to be here. We want these type of players, but you don't really know how long it's going to take. You don't know what it's tangibly going to look like. So I think as much as everyone's excited about the season and anticipating the season, there's no doubt that Ian Cunningham and Ryan Poles are just as anxious. I'm sure their first game when they're doing their million laps, he would not give me a specific number on how many laps he does around the field. He says it's more for time than laps, but because I had to ask the real,
what's the
burning
time?
questions.
What's the time? Did he give
you
the time?
He's like, it depends. He's like, it just depends how I feel. He's like, my legs were feeling a little heavy last week, so it wasn't as many. So I'm like, this is what I wanted to know, like how many laps they're doing and what they're thinking of. So I have no doubt on Sunday at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., whenever they start doing their laps around the field pregame, how much anticipation is running through their minds to see what they've done.
A little side note, 2021, when we got back from COVID and the stands were filled again, I started doing a pregame walk around the entirety of Soldier Field from the lower bowl up to the top, and just trying to get some fresh air before you go cram yourself in the press box for a while. It's a little bit therapeutic. I understand why those guys get the juices going there before the game.
Yeah, try to get your 10,000 steps in before the game even kicks off, and you can, relax and
burn off one of those cinnamon rolls that's, got
whatever Danish they're feeding us up there.
Yeah, you got to get some of that. A couple last things before we cut you free. Obviously, we talked about the luxury of leaning on a defense with a rookie quarterback. I think there's also a running game here that we probably haven't spent enough time in the last 4 months talking about. They went out in free agency, made a calculated investment in DeAndre Swift. They believe he can help them in multiple facets as a runner, as a pass catcher. You've got an offensive line that hopefully at full strength is an upgrade. And you've got Chris Morgan still around, able to build on some of the successful running attack concepts that they've used for the last couple of years here to be one of the best, if not the best, running team in the National Football League. And so I think that there's a sense here that is also going to be a great advantage to Caleb Williams to, hey, kid, you don't have to do it all by yourself. Let's get you some yards on the ground. I'm curious what you make of Swift, what you make of that running backs room, what you make of this running game as a whole.
Yeah, I think, going to go off the offensive line note quickly, Ryan Poles saying that this is the best depth he's ever had. I mean, that's encouraging to hear from your general manager as you start a season. But when you think about leaning on, I think everyone was like, oh, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, like Caleb's going to have all these insane weapons. And I think it was last week, Dan, when DeAndre Swift walked in, and I'm sitting there in the press conference room like, why have we not talked about DeAndre Swift that much? I mean, we certainly have. We certainly have through camp and the preseason, but not as much as you would think, because leaning on Swift, Herbert, Johnson is just so important for him. And I think Swift, although maybe I feel like he's flying under the radar, and that's a good problem to have when you're looking at a roster and talking about stars. But I mean, a Pro Bowler last year, 229 carries, over 1,000 rushing yards, a multi-use back. Like, if you're a rookie quarterback, you're like, this is my guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, he's going to get the bulk of the work likely, but then you also have Khalil Herbert, who's now has plenty of experience and knows how he needs to help a quarterback, because he had his own trying to help Justin Fields for several seasons already. So I think there's such power, and if they use DeAndre Swift in this run game importantly and the right way, and I think Shane Waldron understands it has to start there, because we all want to see Caleb Williams go downfield 50 yards to connect with Rome Odunze. But I mean, the work that DeAndre Swift is capable of and should be tasked to do is probably the most important.
Let's not forget, one of Caleb's longest completions of the preseason was the little screen dump off to DeAndre Swift in Buffalo, and then he took off and made things happen. And so you're looking to kind of lean into that. It has been an offseason. Look, at this time of year, I get a lot of text messages from people asking, who on the Bears should I have in my fantasy team, right? And so my answer this August has been DeAndre Swift. He'd be the first guy I lean on, because I think there's a lot of mouths to feed in the passing game, and I think DeAndre Swift is going to get a lot of work. And then the second answer I give is Cairo Santos, because I think that in the early stage of this season, I think the Bears may have a lot of successful scoring drives that don't end in the end zone. You know, and we might see what we saw in Buffalo, where you're like, that was a fun drive. Well, it only resulted in 3 points. And so that's going to be fun to kind of monitor in the early season if they can get over that hump and start to score touchdowns more than field goals. But that'd be my PSA for our take.
Oh, absolutely. DeAndre Swift, like, for sure, top Bear to take. I mean, from a production numbers standpoint, from a fantasy perspective.
Last thing for you. Caleb Williams is not an option. What Chicago Bears player are you most eager to watch in 2024 and try to get a little bit of better feel for what he can do to break this team through that wall that we've talked about?
I think part of me is like, don't say Rome Odunze, because that seems too obvious, but I want to say Rome Odunze, because as much as the attention, he's received plenty of it, and as he should, because he does look super polished, super prepared to go out there and shine in his rookie season. When you come in with a top draft pick, you almost feel like, wait, he was picked 9th overall for a reason, So, and just watching how he's handled camp, the off season, preseason games, how he operates at practice, I'm excited to see what he soaks in as a sponge from DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, and even just learning and how comfortable he gets in the playbook. And, when you see him line up on Sundays, I'm looking forward to seeing that growth on the field, because he already seems like, you line him up with Tyler Scott and Bayless, and you're like, he's a rookie. Like, he looks like there's this group over here, and then there's this tier of receivers, and that's no disrespect to Tyler Scott or Bayless, but I just feel like Rome has come in beyond prepared.
Super driven, super mature. Now Tony Totap has to keep those feet in the end zone.
Hopefully they seen it correctly, because it confused me, I'll admit.
My answer to that was Jalen Johnson, because I have really kind of grown enamored with his mentality, because a year ago you're like, okay, he's chasing the contract, of course he's motivated, he wants to make the Pro Bowl, of course he's motivated, and then he got those things, and he just, like, almost on a daily basis started uncovering perceived slights. NFL top 100 list, people don't believe I can do this, do that. It just seems like when you talk about the dog mentality, like, Jalen is like breathing that on an everyday basis, and even Monday when he walks into week 1 and you're kind of at that lull, you're not at the first full practice yet, and guys are just getting back from the Labor Day weekend, you just listen to him talk and you're like, this dude wants to play right now, and he wants to play at a high level all year. And I think it's going to be fun to see a guy who got rewarded, as you mentioned earlier, got the contract and didn't take a single second to exhale and feel satisfied. He's just been
no,
like,
you would
let's
think
go.
you would not think he got paid. Like he's the same exact Jalen Johnson, if not more motivated because he knows he has a good offense to partner with the good defense. So I think that changes your mentality as well.
He's been itching for a matchup against Justin Jefferson for a while. Hopefully the two of them will be healthy by the time that first Vikings game rolls around, and we'll get to see that. That's a lot of ground we covered there, Kaitlin. We're off to a great start. This is your first time on Take the North. It will not be your last. I'm making that promise for you.
Perfect.
And we'll have you back before long, and enjoy the week. We'll see you at Haugh as the week goes on. And for our audience, remember to check back at Take the North all week. Ton of content as we lead up to Sunday's season opener against the Tennessee Titans at Soldier Field. It's here. It is here. For Kaitlin Sharkey, I'm Dan Wiederer. For our producer, Adam Sinsinski, thank you for listening to Take the North.